Hello, everyone. This is the 174th episode of the Soccer Nostalgia Talk Podcast. As always, this is Sean from Los Angeles and the Soccer Nostalgia blog. For this episode, I interview Belgian football fans Mr. Jean-Marc Richard and Mr. Stéphane Lievens as we discuss the Belgium national team during the 1980 Euros qualifiers. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you introduce yourselves and your trajectory into football?
May I start, Stéphane?
Of course.
Yeah, so I was born in the southern part of Belgium, the French-speaking part, in 67. I play in the local club, and I've been a football fan since the World Cup in Germany, so 74 with the brilliant Dutch team. And in the beginning of the 19th, I started as a press correspondent for a local newspaper, also for a radio and for local TV. I did it during 30 years, and I had the opportunity to go to 4 World Cup, 5 Euros, more than 20 European final, and a Copa Libertadores final. So I'm quite keen on football since my early age.
I was born in 66 in Brussels. Been a football follower of my life since I was a little kid, starting to follow my local club, RWD Molenbeek, and been to football matches since then, still going. And I'm also traveling the world to see football. I'm a grown hopper as well, so I've seen matches in many countries, including 3 World Cups. But I'm just merely a football fan. The first World Cup final I followed was also the 74 World Cup finals, yes.
Almost the same age, eh?
Yeah, 1 year difference.
1 year difference.
Yeah. So we have more or less the same memories, I hope so.
Probably.
Let's go back in time. Can you describe the status of Belgian football domestically and internationally as we reach the tail end of the 1970s?
On a club level, club basis, Belgian football was one of the best in Europe back then. There were clubs playing finals, European Cup finals, winning them in the case of Anderlecht twice, sending teams to the semi-finals regularly. And we had also some really good foreign players playing in our league. So seeing Belgian football back then was one of the best in Europe.
Yeah, and I mean, you say Anderlecht won 2 European Cups. They also won 2 Super Cups, and Bruges reached 2 finals against the mighty Liverpool, and could have won if they didn't play the final in Wembley.
Yes, I stand corrected. You're correct. I didn't count the Super Cups in it, and they actually won three European Cups in total. 1 UEFA and 2 Cup Winners' Cups. So, but in the 70s they won 2, but they also won Super Cups. Yes. Sorry.
And as you say, some smaller clubs, if you can say, like Molenbeek, reached the semi-final, being unbeaten and being eliminated by Bilbao on the away rules,
exactly.
the away goal rules, which is no longer existing. And the year after, they were eliminated only on penalty shootout by Jena. So it means they stay 14 matches unbeaten in Europe. And clubs like Beveren, Waterskate, they reach the semi-final. And it's unbelievable if you compare with now, of course.
Of course. It won't be possible today after this. But back then, we were quite
and on the
good football club countries, yeah.
And on the domestic side, Bruges was dominating 3 titles in a row with a coach called Ernst Appel, which led Holland, Netherlands to the final of 78. So Anderlecht and Bruges were very, very good team on the European level, but Bruges was dominating on the domestic scene. And on the opposite, the national team was having a low because they failed to qualify for 2 World Cup and 1 Euro, each time beaten by the Netherlands. In 74, it was closed because it was just the goal difference which allowed Holland to go to Germany. And at the last minute, there was a goal which was cancelled from Belgium for an offside, which was everything but obvious.
If you think about it, we should have been in Germany instead of the Netherlands, and football history would have been totally different. I mean, as a whole. So it's incredible when you think of it.
Probably it's better that Holland went for the history of football, but not for Belgian football.
Maybe, yes.
And then we were eliminated in the quarterfinal of the Euro 5-0 in Rotterdam. And probably it's the last match of Goethals and beginning of Thijs afterwards, and eliminated by Holland in 78, which was quite normal. But it was at a low because eliminated by Holland and also beaten 3-0 by Northern Ireland at the last match. It was a down if you compare with what the club could do on the European scene.
And also, if you see the attendances back then for the national team, it was very low.
Yeah,
the stadium was quite empty, or there were only maybe 15,000 people going to the matches at the big King Heysel Stadium, and it was not a good time for the national side.
No, I've seen that we will discuss probably about this match, but against Portugal, which was a very important match, there was only 8,000 persons in the Heysel, which at that time could contain about 60,000.
Yes.
So it's incredible how the national team had become unpopular, I would say.
Yes, that's correct.
For most of the decade, from the late 60s onwards to the 70s, Raymond Lucien's Goethals had been the national team manager. And you mentioned the 0-5 loss against Holland, and that precipitated his downfall. And from then, Guy Thys was appointed as the national team manager. What had been the trajectory of Guy Thys as a player and then as a manager upon his appointment as Belgium national team manager?
Guy Thys was a typical Antwerp boy. His father, Ivan, was also a good football player. He was part of the Belgium Olympic team, which won the gold medal in 1920, but he was injured and didn't play. He was an international footballer, having several caps for the Red Devils, and Guy Thys plays for Beerschot. He was a forward. He then went on loan to Daring Brussels during the war. And then afterwards, he went to Standard de Liège, where he had been called twice for the Red Devils. He played twice against Netherlands, 1 win and 1 loss in 2 friendlies. He was a good striker. Everybody compared him to his father, as usual in this case, and saying he's not as good as his father was, but he was a good player, even if nobody reminds him because it was in the year of the World War II or just after. But he was certainly a good player on the Belgian level.
And also when he had a good I think it was chosen as a national coach because he had really good results with Royal Antwerp FC, where he finished twice second in the league with them, and then he was chosen as the national manager. And also he was a guy who spoke perfect French as a Flemish person, which was he was fluent in both languages. Of course, he was quite relaxed, like a father figure in the national side, which appealed a lot to many people, I think. He had a good personality.
He was also the only coach in Belgium which won the title in the 4th division, in the 3rd division, and in the 2nd division.
Don't know that.
It maybe some others have done it now, but as far as I can remember, he was the only one to do that. And he almost did it also, as you say, with Antwerp, twice second to Anderlecht and to RW Molenbeek.
Yes.
He lost also a cup final against Anderlecht. The only problem for Guy Thys was that he has no diploma. There was a controversy when he was named because Belgian Federation has started an official diploma for all the coaches throughout the country, and they choose a guy who has no diploma, and there was a little controversy. It was the only case. I think he was in competition with someone you may know, Felix Wake, which was the coach of Molenbeek.
Indeed, yes, I remember.
And it was in between them that they choose Guy Thys in 76, and I think Goethals say, well, choose this guy.
I think it was a good choice because it was better than Wake, probably. Yes.
Probably, I do agree with you.
Because Wake, that's a little digression, when he won our title, it's a known fact that Boskamp was the boss of the club, and it was not really Wake, so I think it would not have been a good appointment for national team.
And as you say, he was more relaxed than Raymond Goethals, and also has a better psychological approach to the players.
Yes.
Because Goethals, he was with a few players which always it looked always the same. If you remember the match in Rotterdam where they lost 5-0, Christian Pio was injured and he played because he didn't have confidence in Jean-Marie Prof. And probably it was the worst match of Christian Pio under the Red Devil shirt. And he chose also someone like Jan Verheyen, who was playing in third division in Union Saint-Gilloise at the time, which was a good player, but playing in third division, it's strange.
And he was in his third, well into his 30s, and was not playing at the high level, like you said, anymore. So he was had his fixed team, and he didn't really digress from it.
Yeah, that's even true. When he was in Marseille, like we're talking like in the early 90s, that was an accusation that was leveled at him, that he would have a fixed team and would not look in at the other players. So many players fell out with him as a result.
Like Cantona.
Yeah,
like Cantona,
others, Cantona, Tigana, I could name other players, Besides that, and like you said, Thies was looked upon more as a father figure. In terms of tactics, how do they differ? And how was Thies a plus compared to Goethals?
Well, Goethals was really pragmatic. He built from the defense, and getting the 0 was the main aim for him when starting a game. Thies had a different approach, I think.
Yeah, he was more flexible from a tactical point of view. He relies, I would say, on the strength of the Belgian players, and he tried to adapt his team to the player he had. So he chose different systems, he tries different systems, and he tries a lot of players before the Euro qualifying campaign, because he gave the chance to a lot of players.
Even during it,
yeah.
Yes.
I seem to remember like Jean-Marc Pfaff really got his chance following the 5-0 drubbing. I think that next match against Holland, the 1-2 loss, that may have been his first cap, if I'm not mistaken, with Thies as manager. What was the backbone of the team in the early days of the Thies era that he could rely on?
He relied a lot on the players from Bruges, which has reached the European final, and which has players like Coles, Van der Eycken. Keulemans was not yet there.
Keulemans was not yet there, you're correct. He was still a young player.
But Coles, Van der Eycken, after Meus, which came from Beerschot to Bruges, and a few players of Anderlecht, like Cook, Vercouteren, which was very young at the time. And he relies also on players of Standard de Liège, like Eric Gerets and Michel Renquin. So he was trying to come with the automatism of the club and to put them in the national team.
To the credit to the defense of Goethals, it also must be said that at the end of his career as a Belgian coach, his team was coming really old, so he had to give chances to other players, and he didn't really do that. But a new team had to be built when Goethals' career at the national team came to an end, so it was not so easy for him as well.
As you already mentioned, clubs like Anderlecht and Club Brugge were successful in the European level during this decade. Why do you think these successes had not carried over into the national team?
Maybe because many of their best players were foreign players. Most of their stars were foreign players, like Rensenbrink, maybe one of the best player in the world at the time. Some other players at Bruges as well, and Anderlecht.
Yeah, the foreigners, and Belgium was quite attractive at the time for foreigners, because it was also limited in some countries like Spain or Italy. It was difficult to have more than 2 foreign players at the time, and Belgium was also paying well at that time. Maybe it was not always with clean money. It was sometimes what we say in black in Belgium, but at the time the club were quite rich, and the president, because there was not a lot of sponsoring at the time, the presidents were keen to invest on key players, and all the key players of Bruges and Anderlecht were foreigners. The same in Standard with Serge Winston, Tahamata afterwards, and Rubesch. So it was a time where the foreigners were very important for the Belgian club.
Also, the Belgian Federation was quite creative about it, because they considered foreign players, when he had played 5 years in Belgium, he was not considered as foreign anymore. So they put a limit of 3 foreigners on paper, but in practice there were much more foreigners. Well, not much more, but few more, because of
more than 4, more than 3, in fact.
More than 3 in the big team. So it was a way to get around these rules.
And I think there was another rule saying that if you come to Belgium before 18, you were considered as Belgian too.
As
so it
well,
means
yes.
you can play on both fields, in fact.
We are talking about pre-Jean-Marc Bosman days, of course, when foreign players were not, well, there was a limit in many countries on foreign players.
For the 1980 Euros qualifiers, Belgium were in a group with Austria, Scotland, Portugal, and Norway. Austria and Scotland had just competed in the 1978 World Cup and perhaps as a result would have been looked upon as early favorites from this group. Did the Belgian press itself give Belgium a chance?
It was a mixed feeling, I think. There was a relief because we avoid Netherlands.
Because 3 years in a row, three campaigns in a row.
Yeah, so it was already a good news.
Yes.
But in Belgium, if you know a little the Belgian mentality, we like to consider ourselves as underdogs.
Yes.
We will never say that we are favorite, as the Dutch can say, or as the French can say. This is typical Belgian. And we, of course, you must admit that, well, Austria did a good World Cup in Argentina. Scotland was disappointing, but I remember that was the first World Cup I have good memories. 74, I was very young. But Scotland, at the beginning of the World Cup, was considered as an outsider because they had great players playing in England, like Dalglish, like Souness,
Archie Gemmill.
Archie Gemmill, Robertson.
And they went to the World Cup saying we want to win it.
Yeah, which was not Belgian side.
No,
philosophy.
But that's what they said.
And the fact also is that, well, if the Belgian big teams were professional, not all the Belgian football was professional. There were some teams where you had amateurs or semi-amateurs. I mean, people working half a day and training at night, and you will have players in the teams that still had a job. So, in comparison with the Scottish, they were all professional in England, even if they were in the lower division.
Like the Beveren players who were champions 79, they were not professionals, and there were a couple of them, like Mark Bach and Jean Janssens, if I remember, who were playing the national team, but they were not professionals. Well, they still had a job, but
I think Jan Janssen was a docker, so it was it was something very
so, like
exhausting.
you said, it was not fully professional. The Belgian league, only the big clubs were fully professional. Yes.
So I think there was hope, but there was absolutely no pressure saying we must go to Italy. And Thijs himself says, well, I prepared the World Cup in 82 because it will be a World Cup with 24 teams. So you have a little more chance to qualify. And well, I'm not sure that we will be able to reach Italy. It was quite clever. You avoid pressure, and as he was very convincing, as you say, with everybody, including the press, he had a lot of friends in the press. Nobody says Belgium must go to Italy.
That was the Thijs way. It was not putting pressure, and I think it was a clever guy, so he didn't.
Very clever.
It was his way of doing things, I think. So it was a good move from him. Because if I remember well, at the time, the press still thought we had a chance to go through because it was quite a compact group. There was not a big favorite. Of course, you said Austria had done a good World Cup, but I think we still had a chance. And Norway were considered as the small team there. They were not good at the time. So it was one of the 4 teams.
Well, the qualification campaign started on September 20th, 1978 at Lokeren against Norway.
It was the low point of the campaign.
So, for this match, we have the following lineup for Belgium. Jean-Marc Pfaff of Beveren in goal, Eric Gerrits of Standard Liège. He'd replaced by Francois van der Elst of Anderlecht in the 46th minute. Walter Mews of Club Brugge, Georges Likens of Club Brugge. This was his third and final cap for Belgium. His first cap had been in 1975. Of course, he would have a very successful managerial career, but for the national team, he did not play too many matches. Then you have René van der Reyken of Club Brugge, captain of the team, Julian Kuls of Club Brugge, René Verheyen of Lokeren, Ludo Kuk of Anderlecht, Roger Van Gool playing at Coventry City in England. This was his 7th and final cap. His first cap had been 1975. Paul Courant of Club Brugge. This was his 6th and final cap. His first cap had been 1976. and he'd be replaced by Willy Geurts of Antwerp in the 60th minute. And making his international debut as a second division player, Eddie Woerdekers of Diest. So the match would end as a 1-1 tie. Norway took the lead in the 10th minute when a corner kick from the left side was headed in by Arne Larsen Oakland. Belgium tied the match in the 64th minute when the Norwegian goalkeeper Jakobsen pushed out a cross and Julian Kuhls volleyed it from outside of the box. So, not a positive result for your first match at home. Looking back, was there ever a controversy that a second division player like Woerdekers was selected for the national team?
Don't think so.
No.
Because Vodekers was one key element of the Belgian under 19, which won the European Championship in 77 in Brussels. The Final Four was in Brussels. They beat Bulgaria. And Vodekers was the man who scored the winning goal. He was a very promising forward. And in this team, you had players like Erwin Vandenberg, Ronnie Martens from Anderlecht. Vandenberg was on the bench. He was not playing. Gérard Plessers and Raymond Momens, which would become international player. So it was the first time Belgium won something after the Olympic Games of 20. And Vodekers was already very promising. The surprise was that he was still in second division in 78.
Yes, that's
and that nobody bought
no,
it.
that picked him, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was no controversy.
No.
And in the fact, in the year before, I mean, Gitays has tried all the forwards you could find in Belgium, names that everybody has forgotten, like
Charlie
Hervé
Jacobs.
Delessy. No, Charlie Jacobs would come later.
Would come later,
in
you're
Austria.
correct, yes.
Hervé Delessy, Dirk Beheit, Rudy Aleit. Those guys were tried and, well, of course, were not convincing because they were good at Belgian level, but certainly not on an international level. So Vodekers was a favorite choice, and he was very popular because he was young, he was red hair, and his nickname was Tintin, the Belgian hero of the comic strip. So he was quite popular, so nobody complained about his choice. And on this match, he was one of the best Belgians. The team was very disappointing in overall. Huh?
It was a popular choice, I think. But after this match, I remember that the spirits were really low. Had just drawn against what was considered as the weakest team of the group. Some newspapers said it's already over. Because when you have so many, strong opponents in the group, and then you can only take a point at home against the weakest team, you stand no chance against the others. I remember that it was the general mood in the press back then.
The same feeling, and one must say also that 10 minutes before the end, Belgium was awarded a penalty. And George Lakens, which was a specialist in Bruges, missed it. He shot it in the middle of the goal, so it was absolutely no problem for the keeper. And he say afterwards, Thijs does not need to ask me to shoot a penalty again for the Belgian team. I won't do it anymore. And in fact, he didn't play anymore for the Belgian team, as you mentioned.
And I do not remember why the Lokeren was chosen as a venue. Maybe you remember that, but
yes,
I do not remember.
At the time, they considered that in the Hazel there was too much place, and they tried to attract people in more local teams, and Lokeren was a strong team at the time. They had René Verheyen, which was a Lokeren player, which was international, so they thought it would attract the Flemish public, but in fact there were only 7,000 in Lokeren, so it was not a success, and it lasted for a while. And then afterwards, for the last part of the qualification, they went back
played
to
at the
Hazel.
yes.
The next qualifier is on October 11th at Lisbon against Portugal. This is a Portugal with some familiar names: Manuel Bento in goal, Humberto Coelho, João Alves, the man with the black gloves, and Fernando Gomes, among others. For this match, we have the following lineup for Belgium: Jean-Marc Pfaff, Eric Gerrits, Hugo Bruce of Anderlecht, Walter Muse, Michel Renkan of Standard Liège, captain of the team Kuhls, Van der Reyken, Cook, Frank Verkouteren of Anderlecht, Guy Dardenne of La Louvière. He'd be replaced by Francois van der Elst in the 67th minute, Eddie Woerdekers, and he'd be replaced by Jan Kulemans of Club Brugge in the 60th minute. Now, this was a match that was played under continuous rain. I have not been able to find any footage from this match that ended
Yeah.
as a 1-1 tie. Gomez scored for Portugal in the 32nd minute, and Vercautren tied the match in the 39th minute. At least it was a creditable away tie against a rival for the group.
Yeah, it was not broadcasted anywhere because it was played very late in Portugal. I would say something like 10:30 at
Yes.
night in Portugal, so it was not broadcasted. And there was a kind of problem with Roger Van Gaal before the match. Roger Van Gaal was a player from Bruges, which has been transferred to Bundesliga. He played for Köln. The international match was played on Wednesday, and on the Saturday, he scored 2
Yes.
goals for Köln. And he says, "Well, I'm injured. I will not come." And they say you must come to Brussels to show you to the doctor why you can't play. He say I won't come, and it was the end of the career of Roger Van Gaal. And they called Jan Keulemans, and Jan Keulemans, he was playing that time for Club Bruges, but he went to the airport and he had no boots because he was living in Liers, in Lierre, and he had no boots with him in Lierre. Everything was in Bruges, so he had to borrow the boots of someone else for his first international, or for one of his first international match. But as you say, there are not a lot of image and documentation available about this match. And I remember that it was absolutely not discussed at the time in Belgium, even if it was a good result, because a few days before, Jacques Brel, the famous Belgian singer, died, and it was
Big
everywhere
news.
in the newspaper, big news everywhere in the newspaper, and the football was on the last page of the newspaper.
This was followed by a friendly in November, on November 15th at Tel Aviv against Israel, that Belgium lost 1-0. Vicky Perez scored in the 75th minute. I believe he would later join Strasbourg at some point in the 80s.
Yeah.
Belgium ended this first half of the season, this calendar year, with these 2 ties in a qualifier and a disappointing loss against a team like Israel that they probably should have won. Why do you think the team was not functioning?
Well, the friendlies were not really important back then. It was just like a practice match was just considered as a practice match, and I don't think that don't remember that there was much controversy about that results.
And the fact also that the big Belgian clubs has been eliminated very early in the European Cups this year. So Bruges was eliminated in the first round by Wisla Krakow.
Bad result for them.
Bad result. Standard was eliminated by Manchester City. And Anderlecht won 3-0 against Barcelona and lost 3-0 in Nou Camp and lost on penalties. So it was 15 days after that. And I mean, the international players from Anderlecht, from Bruges, or from Standard were not very motivated, I think, to go to Israel for a friendly. As you said, that time it was not so important. The problem is, and was at that moment, the same as the problem that Thijs had. Nobody was able to score. He has no real striker.
That's correct.
It was very difficult to score. If you see the goal in Portugal, it's Vercautren, a midfielder. It's Coles against Norway. It's also midfield. So the striker did not score. It was his problem. They play not so bad, but were not able to score.
We come to the spring of 1979, and there's a double clash against Austria, who we mentioned had qualified for the 1978 World Cup. You have their star Hansi Krankel, who had joined Barcelona that season. Other players who stand out: Friedrich Concilia, the goalkeeper, who had a short spell at Anderlecht; Robert Sara, the captain; the late Bruno Petzai, who was playing for Eintracht Frankfurt at this point; and Walter Schachner, also from FK Austria. So a good, decent team that would also qualify for the 1982 World Cup. The first match against Austria is on March 28th at home at Brussels at Parc Astrid. For this match, we have the following lineup: Jean-Marc Pfaff, Geretz, Bruce, Muse, Renquin, Kuhl's captain of the team. He'd replaced by Willy Gertz in the 70th minute. Van der Reyken, Vercautren, Francois van der Elst, Albert Klutens of Beveren, who, as you mentioned, will be champions that season, and also Jean Janssens of Beveren, who had last played for Belgium 9 years before that. So as you say, there's a search for a striker still for Thies.
Yeah, and before this match, I must notice that it was not the normal calendar. If you remember well, maybe not in Brussels, but where I lived at the time, the winter of '79 was terrible. I think there were 8 days of national football which were postponed because of the snow and the ice, and they should have played Scotland in February in the Hazel, and it was cancelled because of the snow. And then they proposed another date, and the Scottish refused because the Scottish players were involved in FA Cup or in the League Cup in England. And so it was postponed in November or something like that. And maybe, you never know, we'll never know, but maybe it was the chance of Belgium not to play Scotland at that moment.
Because after the fortunes, they turned. But I remember that season was finished very late because of, like you said, the weather problems. Just as a small side note, you mentioned Consider played for Anderlecht. It was a really, really catastrophic spell at Anderlecht. But that's just a side note. He was really... really, really bad.
He only stayed 6 months,
that's just out of subject. But
he only stayed six months, I think.
Yeah, and it was really he had a really good pedigree on the international scene, and he was really bad here in Belgium for whatever reason. But that game at when you see that only 6,000 people at Anderlecht for that game, I see so that's really a small crowd.
Yeah, and this match ended as a 1-1 tie. Belgium scored through penalty kick in the 21st minute. Petai fouled Van der Elst in the box, and Rene van der Reyken scored from the penalty kick. And Austria tied the match in the 61st minute through Hansi Krankel. Another match that Belgium really should have won at home against a rival, but ended as a 1-1 tie. We come to the returns fixture. So on May 2nd, 1979, at Vienna at Prater Stadion, we have the following lineup against the same opponent. Making his international debut, Michel Prudhomme of Standard Liège in goal. Eric Gerrits, Bruce, Muse, Renkan, captain of the team Cools, Van der Reyken, Verkauteren, Francois van der Elst. Making his international debut and playing in his one and only match for Belgium, we have Charles Jacobs of Charleroi.
I was a little too quick then.
And he'd be replaced by Guy Dardenne in the 86th minute and Jean Janssens. This match ended as a scoreless tie, but Jacobs scored a goal in the 15th minute that was disallowed. We should also mention that Pfaff, Cook, and Clutens were injured and missed this match. That ended as a scoreless tie. So we have 4 matches, 4 ties in the group so far.
Yeah,
I remember that game was considered as a good result, even though we still hadn't won a game, because Austria at that point was considered as the favorite for the qualification. So everybody saw us lose that game, but we didn't, of course.
And if you look at the match between Austria and Belgium, Belgium has never beaten Austria except in a friendly in 78, a few months before. So it was a difficult opponent to play. And as you say, it was not such a bad result to draw in Vienna.
And it was the first game of Michel Prudhomme, of course.
Yeah.
He was a young goalkeeper of Standard, who had made his debut, I think, 2 years before.
In 77, yeah.
In 77
in Anderlecht.
At Anderlecht. He was a third choice back then for Standard, if I remember well. That's Pion Crucifix, I think it was the reserve goalkeeper, who were both injured, and he played an exceptional game. I think he was only 17 years old at the time. For that Austria game, he was only 19. So it was, of course, in its later stage of his career, proved to be one of the best goalkeepers Belgium ever had.
Which was surprising is that the fact he chose Prudhomme, because the second keeper was normally Theo Custos, but apparently Custos had some internal problems with his club in Antwerp.
Yes.
And Thijs, which was an old trainer of Antwerp, has probably good information, and he chose Prudhomme, which did not disappoint in this match. If you look at the team, there were a lot of Walloons. You had Prudhomme, Renkin, Dardenne, Jacobs. something you will never see again in the Belgian team for years. Most of the players are generally Flemish or from Brussels, but Walloons, it's very rare to have 4 Walloons on the pitch.
They always choose the best players, and he was not
Yeah.
concerned by any linguistical that divide. It didn't interest him. I think it was a real Belgian guy, not as I mentioned before, he spoke both languages perfectly. So,
according to World Soccer of June 1980, he was quoted as saying that he was basing his team on the Flemish community because, quote unquote, their players always seem more prepared to battle it out. Was that a true quote, or you think? Or I know it was in a magazine, but
do not remember that, so I cannot comment on it. But
no, I don't.
It's not very taste-like that kind of comment. I think it was not well.
No, well, he could say, well, Flemish can fight hardly, okay, but he wouldn't say Walloons do not.
He was really diplomatical. Also, he would never say something controversial.
And
he was quite the guy who was always with his big cigar and keeping it quiet.
I was also kind of like that seemed uncharacteristic.
It depends in which context it was said, but
of course.
I think maybe it's not complete at least. or not complete. Yeah.
Or something was lost in the translation. Perhaps.
Maybe.
As the season ended, despite being unbeaten, it seemed like maybe perhaps Belgium's chances were remote. Do you remember if Gitis's position was in danger? Was he ever in danger of being sacked, do you think, at this point?
Never.
No.
Well, okay, it was unlikely to qualify, but they were not beaten. And as the draw was 1 point and the victory 2 points at the time, you still had a chance. Nowadays, with the victory at 3 points, probably you would have no chance anymore. And as I say, he was very clever to say, we are looking forward to Spain 82 and Italy will be, well, maybe, but maybe not. And so I don't remember that there was a real danger for him.
No, but everybody knew we had to win the remaining games to have a chance. No, I don't remember that his position was in danger.
Also, do you think there were players that the press would clamor for to achieve better results, but somehow Thijs would be inflexible and refuse to call them up? Do you remember any such controversies?
No. He has given the chance to a lot of persons, and we will speak about the return of Van Moer afterwards, but it was not claimed by the press at the time. It would be after the match in Norway, but not before. And there would be also a suggestion that Juan Lozano could join the team also, but it was afterwards. So no, I don't think the press was claiming that he should try someone else or another player.
We come to the 1979-80 season in the fall and the final phase of the qualifiers. Just like the previous season, the first match is against Norway, this time at Oslo. So on September 12, 1979, we have the following lineup: Jean-Marc Pfaff, Gerets, Luc Milkamps of Waregem, Muse, Renkin, Kuhls, captain of the team, but now he was playing for Beerschot, Van der Eycken, Verkauteren. He's replaced by René Verheyen in the 76th minute. Clutens, Francois van der Elst, Jan Janssens. He'd be replaced by Jan Kulemans in the 76th minute. And this was Janssens' seventh and final cap for Belgium. And he did score in this match. But Norway would take the lead in the 7th minute. A cross from the left side reached Pal Jakobsen at the right side. He controlled, he cut back in and shot past Pfaff. Belgium would tie the match in the 31st minute. Throwing in on the right side, Rich Kuhls on the right, and he passed across for Janssens to strike. Now we come to the 75th minute. From the middle, Janssens passed to the center to Van der Elst, who shot from the edge of the box and gave Belgium the win. And this was their first win in the qualifiers in their 5th match. So at least they were on track now to have a chance to qualify.
At least mathematically, because
Yes.
Tay says in his memoir that it was the worst international match he ever saw. It was apparently awful. I don't think the match was broadcasted on television, but
It was not, no.
no, the best player were Pfaff and Gueret. The other one, it was a nightmare, and it was a quite lucky victory. At 1-0, no way hit the post. At the end, there was a big occasion, opportunities for Norway, so they were quite lucky to win, and everybody was relieved, but it was not convincing at all. And as you mentioned, it was also the first match of Luc Milkamps, which would prove to be a very essential player for Thijs in the forthcoming matches and in the forthcoming years.
And he
But
would
it
be a
was
permanent feature for Taste.
for
Yeah,
four
sorry.
years, for 4 years, yeah.
Yeah.
But he was apparently not in a good form. And I've read afterwards that in the plane coming back to Brussels, he asked a signature to all his partners because he said, I will never play again for the Belgium Devils. I'm very happy to have to play the match, but I will never come back. And he stays there for 4 years and playing a fantastic match in his role. He was a good defender. And what is interesting also about the fact that Milkamps was selected, in fact, he was not in the selection of Thijs, but 2 days before, Mark Bach had a kidney problem. He could not go to Oslo, and Thijs was looking for a solution, and he saw the match of the under 20, and at the time in the under 20 or 21, they could have two older players playing, and the two players that were playing at the time were Luc Milkamps and Paul Tönnies from Winterslag at the time. He played later for Beveren and win the European Cup with Mechelen, with Malin. They say, well, Milkamps, we know where he is working. He's working in a factory called Beckhardt in Waregem, and we have the number, so we will call him. So please rush to Brussels, take your boots, and we go to Oslo with you. And it was like that, and it was absolutely not prepared. And the problem that he had on the pitch was the fact that he was not part of the training session. He was taken at the last minute because of the health problem of Mark Bach.
So how professional the football was back then.
And Tay say in his memoir that, well, I choose for Milkamp because I know his boss was liking football and he would never say no. Because, of course, it was on a Wednesday night, so he had to take a day off or I don't know.
But after that game, I remember that, like you said, it was a terrible game and the mood was not good. They said, if we carry on like that, we will never qualify.
If we trust the history, it was during the flight back after Milkamp has asked for the autographs that Rick de Sadelaar, which was the Dutch-speaking commentator of the BRT, the Flemish television, he was a friend of Guy Thijs because they play against each other in the 50s. De Sadelaar was playing for Racing Mechelen and Thijs for Beerschot. They know each other and they listened. Thijs listened to a lot of persons, but finally he decided and he say, well, I have a problem in the midfield. I have no experience and nobody which make the glue between the defense and the attack. So what do you think? And the Sadelaar say, well, maybe have a look at Wilfried Van Moer. He's now playing in Birmingham. He's, I think, something like 30, 34, something like that.
Yes.
But Birmingham was a very low team in Belgium, struggling against
relegation.
Yes. Yeah, but he was a good player. The problem was that Van Moer was running a bar in Asselt. So he was no longer professional and he was working in his own bar. So he was absolutely not professional.
He also said he left international football.
Yeah.
And he said, I'm quitting the national team. It was, don't remember which year, but it was a few years before that. It was,
I think something like 74. Yeah, it was.
Yeah, so he said, I'm stopping the national team.
Yeah. He was often injured. He had big injuries. He was a very good player, but he had big injuries. And so it was a good idea in terms of capacity of football, but was the man sufficient, still good enough for Belgian national team? I mean, being the playmaker of Birmingham is one thing. Being the playmaker of the Red Devils is something else. I think Thijs went several times hitting at the door and saying, please come back, please come back. And Van Moer was not sure to come. And I think it was difficult. And it was part of Guy Thijs' psychology. I think at the end he say, well, I think you don't dare. You think you will be ridiculous. And of course, Van Moer say, no, I will dare. And he comes to the training session in Brussels.
And of course, this would be the catalyst for the revival.
Yes.
Now, before that, a couple of weeks after the Norway match, there's the friendly against the Dutch neighbors in what was Wim van Hanegem's international retirement match, as well as the Dutch Federation's centenary match. This match, the Dutch would win at Rotterdam on September 26th. They would win 1-0. Jan Poortvliet would score. And this match is significant because Theo Custers would make his international debut, replacing Faf in the 77th minute, as well as Philippe Garot of Standard Liège would also make his international debut. We come to the match that was the international recall of Wilfred Van Moor after 5 years out of the national team. So this is on October 17, 1979 at Brussels at Heysel against Portugal. For this match, Theo Custers of Antwerp starts in goal. We have Gerrits, Luc Milkamps, Walter Mews, Michel Renquin. He's replaced by Philippe Garot of Standard Liège in the 75th minute. This was his second and final cap. His first cap was a previous match against the Dutch. Julian Kuhls, captain of the team. The returning Wilfred Van Moor of Beringen. He'd replaced in the 75th minute by René Verheyen, René van der Reyken, Francois van der Elst, Jan Kulemans, and Eddie Woerdekers, who now was playing for Standard Liège. In this match, Belgium would take the lead in the second half. A cross from the right side was headed in by the returning Van Moor. And 10 minutes later, Van Moor himself crossed from the right side, and it was struck in by Francois van der Elst. So convincing 2-0 win against Portugal. Qualification was back on. And Van Moor had made a difference, and Thijs's decision to recall Van Moor proved to be the decision that would change Belgium's trajectory into the Euros.
Yeah, Hope was back, and it was a turning point of the campaign because the team played really well that day. There was a big change.
And what is quite surprising that Van Moor, which is quite small, he was 1.70 m, scored from a header, which means everything if you score from a header. And it was not the first case. I mean, he was good in heading, and he was a clever player, so he could position himself very well. And of course, as you say, it's the turning point. After that, everything's become possible again.
Exactly. The mentality changed. They had back winning mentality after that game. Yes, it was totally different from the previous 5 games.
We come to the final 2 matches, both against Scotland. The first one on November 21st. It's at the Heysel at Brussels. Some familiar faces in the Scotland team that you already mentioned. Dalglish, among others. Joe Jordan, Graham Souness, John Wark, and Alan Hansen. For this match, we have the following lineup. Custers starting in goal, Gerrits, Milkamps, Mews, Renquin, Kuhls, captain of the team, Van der Reyken, Van Moor, he'd replaced by René Verheyen in the 66th minute, Francois van der Elst, Kulemans, and Woerdekers. Just about the lineup of the previous match. So this match, Belgium would take the lead in the 6th minute through Van der Elst, and Woerdekers would score the second in the 47th minute. This is another match I have not been able to find any footage, but it was a convincing win, again 2-0, and Belgium were well on their way to qualify going into the final match against the same opponent.
It was probably more convincing than against Portugal because the Scottish team had really no opportunity. It was a very good match from Belgium from a defensive point of view, and they dominate the midfield, so it was a well-deserved victory. And as Stéphane said, the mentality has changed, and it changed a lot on the pitch also.
And also it meant that Scotland was eliminated. They were out after this game. They could not qualify anymore after losing that game. So the game in Glasgow would be, well, of course, they will always fight the Scots, but it will be a different context, the last game. They knew that day, that Belgium knew that they would eliminate one of their opponents. by beating them, of course.
And we come to this final match on December 19th at Glasgow at Hampden Park. For this match, we have Custers, Geretz, Milkamps, Muse, Maurice Martens of Molenbeek, Kuhls, captain of the
The best
team.
player of them all. No, I'm joking.
He made a good match in Scotland,
Yes.
Martens.
He didn't play many games.
No,
With
but that
Edwin,
day he
but
was good. He was
yeah,
very
yeah,
good.
he was.
So Van Moer, he'd be replaced by international debutant Gerard Plessers of Standard Liège in the 49th minute. Van der Eycken, Van der Elst, making his international debut Erwin Vandenberg of Liège. He'd be replaced by Guy Dardenne of Lokeren in the 73rd minute and Jan Keulemans. The debutant Erwin Vandenberg would give Belgium the lead in the 18th minute. Rene van der Eyken's free kick was parried by Alan Ruff, and Vandenberg struck in the rebound. A few minutes later, in the 23rd minute, after a series of passes, Vandenberg made a combination play with Van der Elst, who volleyed past Alan Ruff. In the 30th minute, in a counterattack, Martens sent Van der Elst through, who shot past Ruff from the edge of the box as Ruff had ventured out of his line. So after half an hour, Belgium have a 3-0 lead and have more or less qualified. And Scotland pulls a goal back in the second half when John Robertson scored from a free kick. Belgium, after some difficulty in the early rounds, ended the qualification campaign in impressive fashion and just edged ahead of Austria to qualify from the Euros, just by 1 point. So it was 4 wins and 4 ties in this qualification campaign.
It was probably one of the most impressive match of the
Yes.
Belgium team. I mean, scoring 3 goals in Glasgow, even if Scotland was eliminated, as you say, they always fight. And Belgium has never won an official match in the British Island before, even in Northern Ireland. So it was always difficult to win for Belgium in Scotland, in Wales, in Ireland or Northern Ireland, not to say England. And they scored 3 goals, 3 fantastic goals in 12 minutes.
I remember watching that game on TV.
Yeah,
so,
me too.
I quite
Me too.
remember. And
it was
of course,
fantastic.
it was also that game that after all these years without a good striker, they found Erwin Vandenberg, which would become, well, maybe not the best today, but one of the very best centre forwards of Belgian football.
He was in a fantastic form in Lierse. He would be
Yes.
the best European striker of the year 79-80, I think, with 39 goals. He won the Golden Boot, the European Golden Boot for that. I remember also that in the second time, after the 1-3, Scotland has pushed, and Custers made a good match, and the defense was very good, because you never know if they score a second goal, that it would be very difficult. To say also how clever was Guiteis. Van Moer was injured at time, and he knew he had to replace him, but he said, play 5 minutes and I will see how Scotland will adapt, and I will adapt my schedule to that. And that's why he changed only at the 49th minute, and he introduced an additional defender with Gerard Plessers, because the Scottish has introduced an additional forward. So it was very, very clever from Thijs. At the time, there was no all the information that we had. So you see how intelligent and how skillful he was.
Do you remember if Jean-Marc Pfaff was injured in his last few matches, or did he choose to select Custers?
No, he chose Custers because, well, Pfaff had been injured for the match in Austria, but in the second part of the season, he was not as good as he was in Beveren, even if Beveren was good. But Pfaff had and Custers were outstanding in Antwerp. So from the match in Holland, where he replaced him during the match, he would play 7 matches in a row, Theo Custers. And one of the problem of Thijs before the Euro was to choose between Pfaff and Custers in Italy, because it was not clear that it should be Pfaff.
Yes,
Custers was outstanding, and he chose for Pfaff in Italy.
As you said, Van Moer's recall had been the turning point. So, how did he improve tactically? I mean, how did he improve Belgium's play?
He was quite skillful and also very clever on a tactical point of view.
Even if he was, let's say, older, he was strong physically and he had a brain. I think Van Moer was the best midfield player in Belgium before Kevin De Bruyne. I think Kevin De Bruyne is something like Wilfried Van Moer, but with more, with a higher level. But at the time, Wilfried Van Moer was very, very brilliant. He made the great Standard de Liège. It was him who come from Antwerp to Standard to make Standard rising. And he was a good, and he was, as you say, he was clever. So he knew what to do and what he can do and what he could not do. And he was also respected by the rest of the team because he was the missing link between the defense and the attack. And he was still very popular in Belgium, even if he had quit the national team for a while.
Was there a feeling of renaissance following these Euros qualification? And could anyone even foresee the long reign of ties that would come?
He was certainly not put in question, of course, because he just qualified us. But there was no reason to think he would not last at the national team, and he did. Even came back years later after he replaced Meus, if I remember well.
Yeah.
So.
No, of course, but you never know in national teams because he stayed almost 15 years, and 15 years for a national trainer, it's a very long time. But of course, being able to qualify Belgium for the Euro, it was the first time after 72 that they qualified for a Euro. Even if it was a Euro at 8, it was a good performance.
It means it was much more difficult to qualify back then than today because of the small amount of teams.
Yeah, and for the World Cup also. It was easier to go to the World Cup than to the Euro, in fact.
Only 8 teams, like you said. And
In closing, what was the outlook for Belgian football in this new decade of the 1980s and the upcoming 1980 Euros?
It was the start of a kind of golden era, which lasted, half a decade, till the 86 World Cup.
It was difficult to guess that it would come.
Yeah, nobody thought it would be that way.
Because even if, you are in the top 8 of the European teams, you have, in your group, you had Italy, Spain, and England. Yes. And in the other group, you had Czech Republic, Germany, Greece. And Netherlands. So it means strong opponents, except maybe
Greece. Yes, in the other team, in the group, yes.
All the other teams, they were certainly as good as Belgium, in our opinion, at least.
And Italy were at home, so it was seen that Italy were the big favorites of that tournament. So, but the way that the formula was done, everything was possible. We only won one game in that tournament.
Yeah,
and went to the final. So it was possible back then.
In a future podcast, we will discuss the adventure of the Euros for Belgium. With that, I would like to thank both of you for your participation in this interview. All our respective contact information is listed on the blog and podcast uploads. So thank you once again, and hope to continue these discussions on football history.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye-bye.